Hey, how's it going? I'm Mike,
And I'm Leanne.
and this is Calls to Quarantine. And joining us today, we have...
I'm Katina. Katina Sawyer.
And Patricia Very excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. We're excited to have you.
Thank you so much for coming on with us. Very excited.
So I know, a little bit about what you guys are up to, but at the risk of me explaining incorrectly, would you share what both of you guys were up to before the quarantine? So I know you have a podcast, and I believe you both have PhDs.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us about it. Set the scene, paint the picture.
I'll let you go first, Katina.
Okay. So before quarantine, Patricia and I co-founded Workr Beeing, which is, as you mentioned, a podcast and a blog, as well as like other consulting and speaking services. And we have events and things like that. So, before the quarantine, I would say you can weigh in, Patricia, I would say we were doing mostly similar stuff, but things have changed a little bit in terms of in-person types of engagements that we might do. A lot of our trainings have become virtual and whatnot, but beforehand, we were doing like that kind of stuff, delivery in person. We had planned a retreat that we were going to do, which was in person. So we had mostly things that were virtual before, but quite a few events in the works that would require people to be together. And we had done consulting work that required people to be in the same space. And my full-time job is that I'm a professor at George Washington University. And I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Management in the business school. And so prior to quarantine, I was teaching classes on campus. And I was participating in a lot of research that required me to be in person with research participants as well. So I think that's about all on what I was doing before quarantine.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. For me, it was a little bit, less of a transition because I work from home for my full-time job. So I'll start with some Workr Beeing stuff. As Katina mentioned, we co-founded Workr Beeing. We actually met in grad school. We have our PhDs in industrial organizational psychology. And our whole business model is to help people with workplace wellness. So figuring out ways to share good research with the public. And then also, as Katina mentioned, consulting with different organizations. But in addition to that, I work in the applied space. So Katina's the academic, I'm the applied one, and I work at Infor Talent Science, working with hiring assessments. So I help clients find candidates that are gonna be the right fit for the jobs that they're looking for. So it's all from a science perspective and helping match candidates to companies and different positions. But my entire job has been virtual. I've always worked from home since I started this job. The only difference is I'm not traveling as much. So I would travel to clients for meetings, implementations, kickoffs, different things like that. And I don't get to do that right now. So it's been a bit of a transition in terms of like video chats, but from the most part, my work life at least has been pretty virtual before COVID even happened.
Wow, thank you so much. So both of your degrees are in like organizational psychology?
Yep. Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Very cool.
I work in an office and I have found that like my interest in organizational psychology has peaked. Like, do you guys know Adam Grant?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you like him? Is he
Yeah. No,
I'm obsessed with him.
Yeah, his background is very similar to ours. He has a PhD in the same area that we have a PhD in. And before he got like more famous, he used to go to the same conferences and stuff that we go to. So he is rooted in our literature, and he's a professor at Wharton. And so I also followed his academic work for a while. And actually, when Patricia and I were students at Penn State, Adam came to give a talk to our
I'm
like
jealous.
practicum group too. That was like way back in the day before you had any books or anything like that.
Wow.
I will give you a funny tidbit about him since you're a fan.
Uh-oh.
I walked in.
Can't wait.
I walked into the room where he was giving the talk, and I was the first person there because I'm notoriously early. And I get in, and he's standing on the table trying to physically fix a projector. And I just thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I was like, "What is this? Our speaker?"
You gotta hire some.
Aw.
I assume now he has IT people to do that for him.
I'm sure.
I think so, but
At
it
this
was
point
pretty
in
funny.
time.
Also, like, why did our program make him do that?
Yeah.
I think somebody would have helped him,
It's
but
like,
he was just
yeah.
ready to
Yeah.
You guys
get
probably have
going.
an AV department.
I'm sure that's true.
But yeah, I love everything that he talks about, and I find no matter like what's going on in my workplace, I find that he has like some piece of information that's like the reality of the situation that everyone kind of like tiptoes around or is like afraid to say. But I'm mostly just personally curious. How did you guys decide to, get these degrees and study this? What prompted you to choose it?
So my route was very indirect. I was a dorky child that knew I wanted to get a PhD. That was like something that when people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up I said I wanted to be a PhD.
That's awesome.
Did not know what that meant
And
at
whatever.
all.
And you did it. You are a
did
PhD.
Yes, I did it.
Childhood dreams come true. We love that.
But I didn't have I didn't realize that like you had to pick an area, when you're like really young. So when I went to college, I was kind of bouncing around different areas. I ended up being between physics and psychology, which I know are so different. But then I decided I really liked the people focus. So I focused in on psychology and did a lot of research in health psychology. So it's kind of related to, what we're doing with workplace wellness now, but just a different context. I was working with breast cancer patients, HIV patients, and just researching how to manage stress in those types of situations, and decided that the clinical side was just really stressful for me. I had a very hard time letting that go when I would go home. And basically I found the field of IO. So I went to UCLA, and UCLA does not have any IO faculty in the psych department. So I didn't really know what it was until I just randomly found it online and just read a couple. I bought a textbook and read a textbook, read some articles, and decided, well, I think I'm going to try it. And then just applied to programs, just a couple, to see if I would get in. And I got lucky, and here I am. So it kind of wasn't necessarily planned or intentional, but I'm very grateful that I ended up where I am.
Yeah,
Very
I
awesome.
bet. Thanks for sharing.
That's super cool.
Yeah, mine was also like sort of circuitous in a sense because I started, so I also, when I was in college, I thought that I wanted to, when I started college, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. So I started as a biology major. And within like 2 weeks, I was like, I do not like this as much as the other people that are biology majors. Like, I just realized that like every class I was going to, I was like, oh, this is like, I don't like this. Like, and I wasn't like excited by any of my coursework at all. And then I was like, maybe this is a sign that I've selected a major that I should not be in. And really the reason that I picked biology was because I thought like, oh, my parents paid for my college. And I thought like, oh, if my parents are paying for my tuition, I should pick like whatever I think in my mind is like the hardest thing that I should do. And so I just like picked biology. And then afterwards I was like, that's a really stupid way to pick like a career. That makes no sense.
Your life,
is really hard.
Yeah, exactly. So like 2 weeks in, I was like, I don't like this. And I actually like became like an undeclared major like immediately because I just realized like all my classmates were like, it's my dream to be a doctor. Like I love biology. And I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this because I thought it's hard. Like, I don't know. So then I undeclared myself, and then I started taking a bunch of psychology classes, and I really liked them. And then I started working in a psychology lab because I heard that once I decided I wasn't going to go to medical school, I was like, well, what's the like terminal degree, like what's the longest degree you can get here? And they were like a PhD. I was like, okay, what do I need to do to get PhD? And they were like, you need a lot of research experience. So I was like, cool, I'll join a research lab. But there weren't any IO psychologists at Villanova, which is where I did my undergrad. So I was in a social psychology and personality lab, and I studied people in like romantic relationships. I was like coding videos of people who had just answered like extremely sensitive questionnaires, couples that had answered extremely sensitive questionnaires about each other. And we were actually looking at how they handled conflict, but in order to do that, we had to prompt them to have a conflict. And one of the ways that you can do that is to ask people to fill out these like very sensitive questionnaires and then leave them in a room to discuss those questionnaires. And like 9 times out of 10, some kind of a conflict will arise. So, so I was coding like people fighting, basically.
Can we get that? I want to test us.
They were like really interesting. They were mostly about like physical appearance of your partner and what you wish the person looked like versus what they do look like. And it was about secrets and like sexual behaviors, like what do you wish that your partner had never done, and what do you feel like jealous about or insecure about. So it was like a lot of like very like priming questions.
Yeah.
And then they would just leave them in a room for like 30 minutes and say, okay, the next part of the study is delayed, we're really sorry. And then they were being videotaped during their time alone. And of course they were all like, what did you put for the survey? And like some people got through it without having a conflict, but a lot of people got into a fight. And so I was coding it.
That sounds like quite the conflict.
Yeah, it was really interesting. But anyway, so I was like doing that for a few years. And then I started to think about like, well, what do I want to do with this? And because there were no IO psychologists, I didn't know that it was a possibility. So I was thinking like either you could be a social psychologist and you become a professor, you could be a cognitive psychologist and you become a professor, or you could be a clinical psychologist and you could practice. And none of those really sounded very appealing to me. And I wasn't sure what was appealing to me. So I like had a panic attack and I decided like, I'm going to transfer into the business school because at least I know like what business is. So at the last minute, I transferred into the business school and I was set to start as a business student in the fall. And it was going to take me like an extra year to graduate and stuff like that. And then on the last day of my sophomore year, someone came into our psychology class and talked to us about IO psychology. And I was like, oh, I can do business stuff and this, and there's like this other career path. So I started getting really interested in it. And then in my last year, I took like a ton of electives in the HR master's program at Villanova. So I used like all my free psych electives to take HR classes, which was like super related. And then I, basically started applying like 6 months later, I was applying for graduate school. So also not very direct and sort of panicked way that I ended up in the field. But I was trying to find a way to combine psychology with something else that I really liked. And I, at the time, did not think I was going to be an academic. So I really didn't want to pigeonhole myself there. So that's sort of how it ended up.
Wow, that is amazing. I love hearing that. And I think it's really cool that after just 2 weeks, you were able to identify that this wasn't for you and like allow yourself to change your mind. Because I know a lot of people that went and got their whole degree and then a couple of years later, they're like, I think I want a different one.
Looking at one right now.
Yeah.
So. I think that part of it was also that my parents were not pressuring me at all to do biology, and nobody ever in high school ever would have thought I was a biology major. Like all my friends were like, you really like sociology and like English, and like, why are you a biology major? Like, I think when I called my mom and said, I don't like this, she was like, yeah, I know.
That makes sense.
We've all known this for years.
So how did you two meet, and what made you guys start Workr Beeing? How did that come about?
So we met in grad school. I arrived, Katina was already there. She's the second year, I was first year, and we bonded in grad school. It's a very tight-knit, small group of people going through the same extreme circumstances. So we became really good friends there. Katina would always host really fun get-togethers. I always like to tell the story of our Project Runway parties that Katina would host, our very cheap grad school trying to be fancy version of Project Runway parties. So we bonded in grad school. We had a lot of fun there, and we obviously stayed close and good friends since then. And then actually a couple of years ago, we were at a friend's wedding, and a few glasses of wine in, we started complaining about workplace wellness issues. Really, Katina was talking about how like research wasn't being translated in the workplace. Like she's doing all this really great research and nobody's seeing it, nobody's doing anything about it. And then on the other hand, in my job, I work with a lot of clients, and I'm working on some really specific topics in my full-time role, but people talk about wellness issues too. And so, I'll give feedback and things there, but most people don't have a great sense as to what they should be doing from a workplace wellness perspective organizationally. And so I was frustrated too, because like there's so much research and nobody knows what to do with it. And they're just like getting random gurus that don't have any backing. And so we were both complaining about it. And we're like, wait, we can do something about this.
Yeah,
And
I
Workr
love
Beeing
it.
was born.
That is
Mhm.
awesome. Very
And
cool.
when we woke up in the morning, well, my husband was like, you need to like tell Patricia that if she doesn't want to do that idea that you guys came up with last night, like that is fine with you, because you were really like, we're doing this idea. And she was like, okay. But he was like, I feel like you might have pressured her into it. Like, you need to like text her and be like, if you don't want to do that idea, that's fine, because like you guys had drank some wine, and like I don't want her to wake up in the morning and be like, oh no, like now I have to go into business with Katina because we had this conversation. So I texted her and I was like, I don't want you to feel like I was pressuring you last night in conversation into getting into the business or whatever. And she was like, no, I actually woke up and I was like, I'm so excited that we had that conversation. I was like, good, thank you.
That is
She
awesome.
was right. I was
No,
not peer
most-
pressuring anyone.
Most
No.
great businesses start with a few glasses of wine, don't they? So,
True. A wise man once said.
I think it's true.
So I guess my last question for you guys before we get into what you've been doing during the quarantine is, how would you say your own personal mental space was? Where were your heads at? How are you feeling?
Well, I feel like, honestly, it's so hard to remember at this point what life was like pre-COVID.
Fair point.
Yeah, it's just, oh gosh. And I definitely feel like I've been through multiple cycles since then. But, you know, thinking back, my husband and I had just moved into a new place, and we were kind of getting a new routine set up and a new, like, it just felt like there was a lot going on. Like, we're going to check out a new neighborhood and be able to explore and do all of that. And we had just joined a new gym. Like, there was just a lot of new going on, and then it just came to a screeching halt. So I think we were like in an excited place. We were feeling motivated to just tackle all the newness around us when we all got shut down.
Yeah.
yeah.
And how about you, Katina?
I feel like I was kind of in like a normal-ish state. Like, a lot of, I think one thing I'm sure we'll touch on afterwards is like, I definitely travel a decent bit for conferences and just various things, collaborations and things like that. And so that all of that was lined up. Like, I was supposed to go on, I think I had to cancel 15 flights between March and April.
Wow.
I'm on, yes, I got my money back on like all of them.
I
So
was
that's
just
That's
gonna
good.
ask. That's
they all got canceled on me. I should
That's a
say.
lot of
I
phone
didn't-
calls to
yeah.
make, though, to get refunds.
Yeah, it's annoying. And so, but that kind of was like gonna be what I was gearing up for. Like March, April, and May were all just packed with travel. I was not here more than I was here. And so that I was getting ready for going into that time period. And I was also preparing to move. So we moved at the end of April to a new house. And so like somehow that was supposed to happen. So I feel like I was just sort of like, I don't know, like you just get done what you need to get done on a daily basis. And I feel like I was in the mode of like, just like kind of trying to anticipate like having to ninja a bunch of stuff.
Whew. All right. So that, yeah, it must have been a very dramatic difference for what wound up happening for you in
Yes.
April. So at what point did you realize that this was serious and this was really coming? Like, what was your final moment of like, oh, wow,
World's gonna change.
something's happening?
Lifestyle's different.
Yeah, we had a bunch of, so we were supposed to have a retreat on April 18th. And it was gonna be in Philadelphia. We're gonna have 20 attendees, and we're gonna do a bunch of different trainings and content on a topic called psychological capital, but really just helping people cope with challenges at work. So we were gearing up for that as this all happened. We had built out the deck. We were starting to kind of whittle down the content, figuring out exactly what we wanted to cover, starting to really push the promotion. I mean, literally paying for ads for, getting people's focus on the retreat. And I think it felt real the day that we realized we're not going to be able to have this retreat, because we had a couple things. So in LA, we shut down really early. So it was kind of like one day I was at Orange Theory and the next day we weren't allowed to go anywhere. So it was just very sudden. But I don't think I really expected it was going to last as long as it did until, probably early April, to be honest. Like I felt like things were shutting down in March, and I knew we probably were going to have to move the retreat. I'm pretty sure we canceled it before April 1st, but it just didn't feel like it was going to actually be that long. But I think when we decided, okay, no one's going to come to this retreat, we're not going to be able to go there, everything's probably still going to be shut down by then, we have to cancel it. That was when it really sunk in.
Yeah. And I think additionally, and California has been, I think I was reading somewhere that like California is like the number one most like cautious, has been the number one like most cautious state. And then DC metro area is like right behind it. Like people here have been like really, really like locked down, social distance, very long time. And we're still like not open until June 10th. So, or like even like they're like doing like phase 1 of opening outside of DC area. And I think they just got approval to do phase 1, but like, it's like, you know, other people I know in other states and whatever, it's been more open for a long time, or a longer time. And so, so we're definitely in like more like lockdown areas. But I remember it must've been early April. We had already canceled the retreat, but this was like a secondary, like, like it was in early April, and they announced that we were going to be on some form of lockdown at least until June 10th. And I remember being like, I've already been in quarantine for like 2.5 weeks. And like, it just hit me like, I'm going to be in this for like another 2.5 months. Like that's long. And like, all of a sudden it just like the June 10th date just like seared in my mind. And I was like, oh man. And like, I obviously like, I completely agree with why we're in quarantine and we should be in quarantine and all that kind of stuff. But it just like hearing June 10th when it was like April 1st or something, I was like, oh my God, like how am I going to sit in here for that long? But yeah, so I think that's when.
Someone that had 15 flights scheduled, I can imagine. So how were your emotions? How was processing this? How was this for you specifically? And I guess to add to that, what happened with your job and how did you guys shift gears in your business together?
So in terms of how we shifted gears, I mean, we canceled the retreat and then we started kind of planning what is our summer going to look like. So we created a free online course for people that's available on our website about managing stress at uncertain times. So we kind of went that route to get people some content that we thought was really important at this time. We also did some virtual happy hours with some of our followers, which was really fun, and just getting a way to connect people and doing something social. So that was one thing we did as a pivot. And then, you know, we've kind of created a business plan of different things that we're working on over the summer, some writing we want to be doing, some research we want to be doing, and then are planning more virtual content. So that's, you know, obviously it takes time to get it all built out, but we think it's important to have something out there that we can share with folks until we're able to do something in person again. So we're just trying to pivot more virtually from that perspective. In terms of my full-time job, it's kind of been pretty stable. I mean, we've had clients that have had some struggles with everything going on with COVID, but we as a business have been pretty stable. I'm working from home. It's just the only difference is now clients, when we have calls with them, actually want to turn on their video. So that's been a difference. Usually they never want to do that, and now they're all about it.
I'm curious, do you feel a difference in how the meeting goes when there is or isn't video?
I do think people are more attentive with the video. So when we have like a big
like
meeting,
see people like
looking around everywhere, walking away like,
If they're daydreaming, they're doing a very good job hiding it versus like do multitasking that they used to probably do. So I do think that the meetings have been more productive, and I do think that our connection with some of our clients has actually improved, because a lot of our clients we don't see that often. My clients are all over the country, so you know, if I'm going to Michigan, it's probably once a year at most. It's not that often. So I can actually see their faces and talk to them. So that's been nice. But generally speaking, the job hasn't changed dramatically, because I would go in these waves of lots of travel for work and then no travel for work for a couple months and then tons and then nothing. So I just felt like one of those downward trends.
So
but
your company works with other businesses that like have questions about their culture and want to improve?
Yeah, so at Infor, we're actually a software company. So it's a part of the applicant tracking system. You can attach an assessment. And so as people are coming in and applying for jobs, they'll take this assessment, which will help us understand who they are from like a personality perspective. And then on the back end, we've built some statistical models to tell us, all right, this type of person is good at being a server. And this type of person is better back of house. And this type of person is going to be a good engineer and things like that. So we gather information about people and then help the clients understand where that person's going to be a good fit. And then if maybe they applied to a job but they're not as good of a fit, we give them questions to ask, because people can compensate, you know, for potentially places where they're not as good of a fit. Maybe they've been doing the job for a long time and just know where their weaknesses are and have been able to compensate. So we help with giving them questions and stuff. So it's all in a system. So my job is to help clients build out that algorithm on the back end. So we gather data and we build those models. And the clients just run and use the system when they do the hiring. So as you can imagine, hiring is paused quite a bit in a lot of places.
But still, this is a very cool idea. Like every job site I've seen is nothing like that before. It's like pick a job, hit apply, and send your resume and see what happens. But it seems like you guys are doing a lot to like make sure people are being placed in the correct spots.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Do you have like strong opinions on the plethora of personality types that exist out there? I want to know them.
So in terms of the different types of tools to assess personality, there are some good, some not so good. A lot of the free ones, I will say, are not so good. Probably the ones that you've taken, not be so good. But yeah, so I mean, offline, I can tell you what I like and what I don't like.
Sounds great. I will take you up on that.
Yeah, but yeah, the idea is to help. I mean, it ties in nicely with what we decided to do with Workr Beeing, in the sense that when you're a really good fit to a job, you're happier in that job. You're more likely to stay in that job and thrive in it. So even though it's not exactly the same type of business, I do find what we do really important, because I think it actually helps employees, and I think it helps employers from a culture perspective, having people that are a really good fit. So we've had to pivot a bit in terms of like our conversations with clients. A lot of it is now, all right, well, we have this whole talent pool within the company. How can we leverage people? So maybe our restaurants are closed, we don't have traditional servers. Well, who's going to be good for this type of takeout type of position? Or who can we transition to these other roles, because we now want to use our staff in different ways because we've had to adjust. So we have had some work with clients in that sense. And then some clients that have just been really quiet because they're not hiring, and will probably come back when they're hiring again. So it varies quite a bit. Yeah. I totally forgot what the rest of the question was.
And just how are you handling, being in quarantine? It seemed like you were ready to explore, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, I will say the first few weeks were a roller coaster, definitely. And then I feel like somehow I've managed. I feel like people tend to go to their baseline as long as there's no other underlying mental health issues. So now I feel like I'm back to baseline, but there were definitely a few weeks where it was just like, this sucks, I can't believe I can't go anywhere, and then just feeling really cooped up and crying about it and not knowing why I'm crying about it and having to realize that it's because I feel cooped up. So making sure I went outside to get some fresh air and walk and do that. So I definitely had a bunch of ups and downs, and I mean, probably more downs, but just a cycle of different types of downs, I guess. So, anxiety and sadness and all of that kind of came with it. I think the anxiety still lingers, especially as things start slowly opening up. It's like, is that the right move? I don't know. It makes me a little bit anxious.
Like, how far is 6 feet when you're looking?
Yeah.
That person might be 5 feet. I don't know if I can trust them.
Right. It's like that person wearing their mask right. Someone's got their nose sticking out of their mask. Exactly. I'm not okay with you. Stuff like
all
that,
these things run through your head nonstop.
Yeah. Oh, I remember when it first started happening, I caught myself being suspicious of like a random person on the street, and I'm like, wait, what is happening? I don't think this way about people.
Yeah.
And then I was like,
we have to get on the other side of the street right now. And we jaywalk straight
I don't like
across.
this. I like people a lot.
Yeah, that's very weird.
Yeah. And how about you, Katina? How was, the transition into quarantine for you?
So I think that for me, it was a little bit easier than it was for some of the other faculty at GW because I had already taught online before. So I'm familiar with the technology. So GW's campus went entirely online. So we had no more student in class courses. So we had to all adapt. So basically like the day before spring break, they announced that we wouldn't be coming back from spring break and the rest of the semester would be online. And so you had like a week to take all your classes and figure out how you were going to teach them online. So I had 3 classes, 1 was online, 2 weren't, but I knew how to use at least like the online technology. And I had already had this other class that was going online. So I only had to put 2 online instead of 3. Some folks that I know whose jobs are more teaching focused and less research focused than mine, they had like 5 or 6 classes and they had never taught online and they had to figure out in a week how to get like all of their materials online, like syllabi, everything. And like, that was super stressful. And then also just facilitating online is different than facilitating in person. And it requires a little bit of like getting used to. And so I think that people were really panicked, especially if they're not super technologically inclined. I think that they were freaked out because a lot of our ratings, like our performance reviews, have to do with our teaching ratings. So if the students think that you suck at being a teacher online, then like those ratings stay with you. So people were really freaked out that their ratings were going to tank and things like that. But I was lucky, I feel like, because it was just more, I had more tasks to do because I had to convert the materials into online, but I wasn't like trying to learn something new. So that was helpful. From a research perspective, I had one project that was super cool that I was doing like observational data inside of an organization, like going to different sites of the organization and watching and observing. And I had to stop going there because of obvious reasons that they were an essential business, so they were still open, but all GW researchers were not allowed to participate in in-person research, and we were definitely not allowed to bring students with us for in-person research. And my project largely required me to work with one of my PhD students. So we had to like put a halt on that project for a little while until we figured out how to do it virtually. So there were some things to adjust to. I think one other thing that we did, or something that was like an impact on me because I moved and like all this other stuff going on. And I think because a lot of research gets done with, like, I work with a lot of collaborators all over the country in different universities. And so a lot of our stuff is virtual anyway. And I feel like for some reason in our field, it felt as if there was this like overreaction, I'm going to demonstrate that I'm not going to be unproductive during this period of time. So it felt to me that like all of a sudden, all these people were like coming out of the woodwork of like projects that like we hadn't followed up on in a while. Like, hey, we should have a call. We should have a meeting. We should do this. And I was like, this is like getting out. Like, it's okay if we're still the same amount of productive or less productive right now. We're in a pandemic. Chill out. But it seemed like things were like ramping up. So it was kind of like a weird time period. I feel like people have adjusted a little bit more now. But yeah. And I think one other thing that, was impacting me was like, I was getting kicked out of a routine. So like, I do generally follow a routine when I'm at home, and I generally follow a routine when I'm like on the road. And so I was sort of like thrown out of I was like bored with my routine. And like, I also like used to go to the gym, but like my gym was closed. Like there was like a lot of stuff that like I was just like out of a routine on. And so one of the things that we did to respond to that, actually, in addition to what Patricia mentioned, was we put together a reset, like a remixed reset. We have this like thing that we sometimes do with our like followers, which is like a 5-day, there's like mental health challenges that you participate in. Like there's like Mindful Monday, Take a Break Tuesday, Work Life Wednesday, like things like that. And so we partnered with a gym who, like, full disclosure, my cousin like owns the gym. So but they're very good.
Okay.
And so
Shout
we partnered with
gym.
Yes, we partnered with my cousin and her business partner to put together something that had mental and physical health challenges in it to try to help people get back into a routine, because we were feeling like we had kind of gotten out of a good routine. So I think that was the hardest part, was kind of like, even though I had more stuff to do and I was more scattered, I had like variation, and the variation in my different routines made me stick with the routines. And when I only had one routine, I got bored of it, and then I got out of my routine, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. It makes perfect sense. And once like a routine is rattled, it's like, it takes a while for you to even like gain back the strength and ability to think about putting a new routine in place. Like,
Yeah.
like for me, it took me like a good 2 weeks to like realize that I couldn't just wake up and roll on the couch and like do my work from like that's not gonna work. You need to like figure out a new routine.
Yeah.
how this new lifestyle is actually going to be beneficial for you.
Shower
Yeah.
still required, surprisingly.
You do still
Yeah.
need to
No idea.
shower.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, the other thing that I think is kind of interesting is that like because I canceled so much travel, it was making me think about like I've spent more time at home than I don't know when's the last time I've spent so much time just like in the same location. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. And so like I have been enjoying being home more. Like I think it's really nice. It also was making me think about like how much time I was missing not being home. Like I'm like, oh, like because my husband never travels. Like he never has to travel for work, and he's more of like a homebody. And then like I guess I just never really thought about it like until I was sitting at home being like, oh, I would have been gone this week, and then thinking like, oh, but I like would have missed all these things that are like still happening here. But like when I'm in another space, I'm never thinking about the things that are happening in spaces that I'm not. Like I'm always just like thinking about what's happening where I am. And so I feel like that was an interesting learning of like, oh, there are things going on here that I enjoy that I'm missing that I like don't necessarily give enough credit while I'm not here. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
I feel the same with that one.
Yeah, that's a great segue into, you know, what pieces of this quarantine that you've adapted or started for yourself do you think you will continue on after quarantine? Who knows when, but after it's over.
Eventually.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we'll see when that happens.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, to that travel comment, I do think that more people are going to do virtual meetings more often. So I think that there's actually going to probably be fewer people traveling for business. So I don't know how that's going to impact my job if I'm going to be just doing more of these Zoom meetings that I have with clients now, and just have rare occasions to go out and travel to them. And maybe the same thing with Workr Beeing. We may not have quite as many in-person events as maybe we would have liked to before, because I think that sometimes, you know, our clients with Workr Beeing may also not want as much travel and maybe more virtual as well. So I think there's going to be that as a big change. So on that note, I think we'll probably be, at least, you know, I work from home already, so it'll probably be trying to keep that momentum and that routine at home, because I think when we're traveling a lot, like Katina, you said you had a good routine when you're traveling and a routine when you're at home, but they're like two different routines. I think maybe my routine will be able to be more consistent, which will be really nice. So I'll kind of like to have that more consistency and maybe fewer distractions. That would be a nice thing to keep. And I think the other thing I think that will be nice to keep along from what we've learned from the quarantine and would be the focus on mental health. So I know we've already done that with Workr Beeing. We've already been focusing on that to some extent, but I don't think that the broader world, I mean, has and hasn't, right? It kind of goes in waves as to when that's a hot topic. But I think that people,
actually, to your points earlier, at least like in the corporate world, it feels like they want to, but they don't really even know what to do.
Where to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be, well, one, that might bring us some opportunities with Workr Beeing, which we hope is true. But also I hope that having that focus, you know, I want to maintain that focus. You know, we did that, like Katina mentioned, the reset, like we just did that recently. And I've been focusing more on my mindfulness, and I really want to continue that. That's not something I practiced consistently before the quarantine. And now I'm not understanding why I did it before, even though I knew all the research behind it. And I was, you know, enjoying might be pushing it when I first start, but I did enjoy the benefits of it. And now I've gotten to the point where I actually enjoy that time. And I want to make sure I maintain that when we're able to go back out, that I'm not just filling every time slot with busyness.
Yep. Can relate. That is awesome.
Yeah, I think similarly, I have had to get better at putting time in my schedule for like doing things that are dedicated to like, you know, more mindfulness related activities or like physical activity, in a way that like requires a lot more personal accountability. Like, I don't know, before like I mean, the gym requires personal accountability, but you're also like in a group. Like I was taking like classes and stuff like that. So I feel like you have like some like group accountability, or like the trainer at the, like you feel like they know you're missing or whatever. Whereas like at home, like nobody cares what I'm doing.
Yep.
So I think
tomorrow.
it was
I could do it tomorrow.
exactly right.
Next week.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think like building in some like the personal accountability into the routine was helpful. And then I also think, yeah, just recognizing that you know, being here more frequently is not a bad thing. I didn't think it was a bad thing before, but I didn't realize that maybe it was like a little bit imbalanced. And then also that people that live far from me, I don't have to like just not talk to them if I'm not in the same physical location as them, which I think like a lot of people have come to recognize over this time period. Like I have really good friends from college that all live in different states than I do. Like I don't need to talk to them once a year. Like I could
That
talk
is
to them
such a good one.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
That's
Like
so true.
the first week, you're like friends from across the country are like, do you want to Zoom? We're like,
Yeah.
why weren't we doing
No
this
longer.
before?
No longer is
Right?
it one tweet
Yeah.
every 3 years at each other, like, LOL. It's now
Yeah,
you actually have a conversation. It's like, hey, you're just as close as the person down the street from you is.
right. Exactly. I think that's exactly what it is that people were like, well, now that we're all equally inaccessible, I could equally access anyone. Like it like took that for you to realize that that was possible.
Yeah, such a good
Yeah.
point.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like strange, but it ended up being good. Like we've been talking, even like I see my brother fairly frequently, so I think part of it is that we're not seeing him. But like, you know, since we moved to DC, I'm from Philly, and since we moved to DC, we see my family way less. And we've been Skyping with my brother like once a week, and like I definitely was not talking to my brother once a week before this. So I think there's some
That's
positive
great.
things that come out of it from a personal connection standpoint, even if they're like weird because of a lack of personal connection. In some
Yeah. I get it. And now I'm just out of curiosity, do you or have you guys done any research on working from home? Is that like a topic that comes up for you guys, and what were your thoughts before and after? I'm very curious.
Yeah, so there's definitely research on working from home and the benefits and the costs. And honestly, there's a lot of benefits. So it's not, I think it's kind of nice that this might be an opportunity to open people's eyes up to the idea of remote work. I mean, from a business perspective, there's benefits because one, you can have talent from anywhere, right? You don't have to require someone to be in a physical location. If you're able to work from wherever, you can have the best talent regardless of where they live and where they sit. So that's huge from a business perspective. And then when it comes to like productivity and performance, I mean, all of those things, we do see people that work from home tend to do really well. They tend to get rated as high performers by their supervisors. And so it's not like it's a detriment to your performance. I think quarantine in general, COVID in general may have impacted people's performance, but
It's important to
good
distinguish the two. It is.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But I think that working from home, generally speaking, is not going to hinder performance overall. You know, we do see that there's improvements sometimes, you know, when it comes to work-life balance. It just, you have to be good about it. You can't just let it, you can't just let work take over your entire life, right? So you still have to be able to create some sort of schedule for yourself, but people have more time when they are working from home and they're not having to commute. So from that perspective, it's positive. I mean, there's a lot of positives. I think the downsides that do come up are relationships with coworkers, but we're all trying to build and maintain relationships right now with everything in the quarantine. So maybe we can take some of those skills and translate them to continue relationships with coworkers, even if we are remote. Because like I said, I've been remote for 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have really strong relationships with my coworkers because we take that effort. So research does show that it does impact those relationships, but if you can mitigate that, right? Like we would have virtual happy hours before that was a COVID thing.
Yeah.
We would have these types of events to try to maintain that relationship and bond outside of work so that coworkers can really rely on each other. And I think that's really important. And I think we've learned those skills right now. So it doesn't, to me, I think everything points to working from home being more accessible and more prevalent after this is done.
Yeah, I love that. I know for me, I hadn't worked from home and now I do. And I guess kind of to Katina's point earlier, I was finding myself struggling with accountability because of that whole, like, there's no one checking in, I can do it tomorrow. And I got to a point where I started asking my coworkers to hold me accountable to like made up deadlines because I just felt like I needed something, and they're like, just like, okay, sure. But it really worked.
Mhm.
So now I just like pretend that there's deadlines even though there's not. And I found that really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because if you're like, even just being physically removed from someone, it's like less of a reminder of like what's due to who or whatever.
Mhm.
We talked about some research recently that showed that like when you use like software, like a Slack or something like that, it helps people to be more productive because it holds people accountable and it keeps like a paper trail of who's supposed to be working on what next and when it was supposed to be due. And that helps people in virtual teams in particular because it feels like there's like some formal accountability, not just for you, but like you can also count on other people to be formally accountable, if that makes sense. So yeah, so that makes sense in light of the research. I think this time period has also opened up like some opportunities for research that didn't exist before. So a lot of journals, like academic journals, are doing calls for research that are COVID specific. And one of the things that I've been working on with a colleague, we haven't collected any data yet, but it's presenting a really interesting opportunity to look at how do people adjust to working from home. And even though these are different circumstances, because especially people with kids and like when two people are working in the house together at the same time, like all of those different complications sort of exacerbate some of the things that we happening under normal virtual work scenario. But we are getting an opportunity to sort of get a glimpse at how can we set people up for success when they're transferring to work from home. So we're looking at like whether or not you can shift someone's mentality in terms of how they think about their work and their life fitting together, and whether or not an intervention that would help you to think about your work and your life as enriching one another, as opposed, we're looking at it as like a fixed versus an expandable pie mentality. So like work-life balance is a very fixed pie mentality. It's like, I have this much time in a day and I need to do some of these activities and some of these activities, and they need to sort of like find a mixture that works for me. Whereas expandable pie is like, me participating in this actually makes me better at that, which makes me better at that. So we're looking at if you can like actually shift people's mindsets from being fixed pie to expandable pie, if that will actually help them to better adjust to the challenges and like grow more resilient in the face of challenges and be more likely to continue doing virtual work. And we're also looking at how it impacts people's like leadership. Like if I'm in a virtual work scenario, am I willing to see myself continuing to work virtually and growing my responsibility? Or do I see that as like, I already don't have enough time to get done what I'm supposed to get done, so there's no way I'll be able to take on more kind of mentality. So anyway, we're looking at that. Again, I don't have any data, but I think it is presenting an interesting opportunity to look at some things that we haven't been able to examine in the past in like quite as systematic a way.
I think that what you two women are doing is so awesome. I love this stuff. It is so interesting.
Thanks.
Cool.
We're glad. We feel very nerdy
Yeah.
about it all the time, and we're happy to be appreciated by someone.
It's
She was so
awesome.
excited for this. She's like, I found the perfect people.
Well, I
Yay.
really like, after like learning from Adam Grant, even just like within my office, I find myself gravitating towards and feeling passionate towards these concepts and ideas. And I'm like reading books on it in my own time, and like just like really, really fascinated by it. I honestly didn't even know there was a degree behind it until like a few months ago. But I just
You should become an IO psychologist.
I should,
We should
shouldn't
turn
I?
you.
It's awesome. But thank you so much for sharing and being open without everything. Is there anything else that you would want to share with someone that is either, moving from working in an office to working from home? Or we definitely like plugs, definitely plug in anything that you're working on.
Anything else you're working on you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I think for a takeaway point from people that are transitioning to a work from home environment, I want to talk to the leaders out there, because I think we talked a lot about as an employee, but managers and leaders need to let go, just let go. It's going to be okay. You have adults working for you, not children. So I think people just need to, sometimes it's hard for leaders to just kind of not physically see their employees working. And so we know in the research that providing people with autonomy and flexibility is really important and is going to help your team be more productive and more effective. So that's just one last message for the leaders to learn how to let go, trust your people, build those relationships so you can feel like you can trust them, and let people have the autonomy and flexibility. So that's my last like scientific piece of advice. I don't know, Katina, do you want to plug us since I did that?
Yeah. I would say my last piece of advice linked with a potential plug would be, this is a really weird time. It's tiring. Like, research shows that when you go through an emotionally or cognitively difficult time, which I think this is both, you get tired more frequently, you need to take more breaks, like it's harder for you to process complicated tasks. So if you're feeling like it's harder for you to get through work, or you need to like just take more time for yourself, don't get mad, or try not to get mad at yourself. Just say like, this is a very normal reaction to a very strange time. Like, this is a time that's going to be in history books that people are going to look back on and be like, whoa, people lived through that crazy time. Right. And like, obviously it could be worse. Like, we have electricity, we have internet, like whatever, but like, but at the same time, like, it is a strange time. And so like, you know, just letting yourself figure out what you need to do to get through in the way that you need to get through, I think is important. And growing your capacity to do that is actually something that you can work on. So you can grow those resources. So we have I mentioned the Managing Stress course online that has some really good tools and tricks for being able to recognize your stress and manage it and cope with it. And then also, at some point, whether it's virtual or in person in the future, at some point, we are planning to continue delivering content in retreat format in some way. And that will be around psychological capital, which is growing your optimism, hope, self-efficacy, and resilience in the face of challenges. And so those are also resources that you can grow to better be able to tackle those challenges. So like, honor and recognize that you're having trouble, allow yourself to take care of yourself in that time, and then you can actually do things to approach it so that you feel better about tackling those challenges moving forward.
And if you're impatient about learning more about psychological capital, we have 2 articles on our website about it and a podcast episode.
Yeah.
So you can go check it out there too, so that you can kind of get yourself familiar with the concepts and some basic small exercises you can do to help you build that resiliency.
That is actually my first time hearing that phrase or concept. So I am so excited. I am totally going to go nerd out and learn all about it.
We'll have those links down below, so make sure you check them out.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. It was really nice.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Katina. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.